Hey everyone, thanks for joining us. You're going to have a great time in the next few minutes hearing from really good strategies from some CEOs and entrepreneurs in Arkansas on the Shrimp Tank, where we teach you how to go from a shrimp to a shark in the business world. Hey everybody, welcome to the post-show wrap-up of the Arkansas Shrimp Tank. I'm your host, Rich Jensen, along with my co-host, David Sims, and our special guest today, Jennifer Hopp, who's not of Arkansas. You know, usually we bring you some of the brightest and best of Arkansas entrepreneurs and business owners, but Jennifer...
That's right. She is from Puerto Rico.
Via Silicon Valley.
Silicon Valley.
That's right.
And she's a Cal alum, so I'm real happy to have her on the show. So, hey, if you want to catch the full podcast of our time with Jennifer, go to shrimptankpodcast.com/Arkansas. You can hear the whole podcast there. And we're actually going to have her back next week for another talk about doing business in Puerto Rico, the lifestyle, business, and tax benefits of that. So you'll want to tune into that as well. So
absolutely. It was a great show. Jennifer, thanks
really
for
fun.
coming. It's great to have you.
Thank you.
Ever
for
since we
having
met
me.
you in April, we just knew we had to have you up here. I'm just so happy you came.
We did happen to meet in Puerto Rico, so that made it all the better because we had
right.
a blast down there, and it's a beautiful place. So.
Yes. So this show was about ATO Ventures, which means against the odds. And you shared that on the podcast. You don't have time to share it on the video here, but what is it that makes ATO Ventures different?
So I think the main thing to keep in mind that makes us different is that we go in very early stage. So we're looking at technology companies before they launch, which is different from most venture capital funds that are expecting a startup to have traction, either users or revenue. Instead, we like to go in before you've launched and spend the time actually testing your market assumptions and making sure everything is correct before funding.
That really does put you in a different space in the startup field.
It does. It's incredibly risky. It's the riskiest time to invest in a startup, which I wouldn't recommend anyone do unless you have a risk mitigating strategy like we do, which is to do the market validation testing before launch.
And you said something earlier in what, quote, the green room, which we don't really have. It's not painted green, but I talked about our friend Jeff Stinson, who's also been on the Shrimp Tank. And I talked about he was funding companies that were already profitable. And I realized what I meant was they're already revenue generating. And you come in before you're pre-revenue. So,
Exactly.
yes, right.
Exactly.
So, you also talked a little bit about something. We didn't get to it on the podcast, so you won't hear it if you go back. But you have something coming up called Pitch and Play in Paradise. Share with our viewers a little bit about that.
Yeah, we just threw a fancy name on something to give us an opportunity to talk about it. But we're really looking to bring startups to Puerto Rico, and we're going to do an event. It'll be in the spring, and we're going to be selecting startups, 2 from outside of Puerto Rico, 2 from inside Puerto Rico, where we'll actually pay for the entrepreneurs to come down and spend a few days with us doing one-on-ones. We'll help them hone their pitches. They'll get to interview with other investors as well as ATO Ventures, and the idea is that we'll find some that we actually want to help do the market validation and invest. So you have the opportunity if you apply, which you can do on our website.
And I would encourage you to do it soon because you said you have 800.
We do
startups.
have over 800 submissions, and we go through those pretty fast in terms of honing them down.
And one of the things you talked about was always think in your head what can be, not what can't be. We alluded to it. You'll have to hear the whole podcast, but don't just assume because 800 have already applied that you can't apply. So.
No, I definitely would encourage people to apply, especially if you take a look at our website and you feel like you're in our sweet spot. We are really interested in bringing startups to the island, exposing them to Puerto Rico, as well as the idea is to get an investment. So you'd get a free trip to Puerto Rico and potentially an investment, as well as work with.
Do you have any room built in the budget for their advisors to come with them?
Suddenly you're everyone's advisor.
That's right.
We're going to go through and get all the names of all 800.
What you were just sharing there, too, is one of the distinctives that you talked about at the end of the podcast when we asked you what's your vision. And one of the unique things that people who apply and eventually would get selected by ATO Ventures is that they get a different kind of experience in a startup. And so share with our viewers what you shared at the end of the podcast about that.
Yeah, I have a philosophy about startup and startup life that goes against the grain a little bit in terms of what we are taught in Silicon Valley, which is all about this hustle and grind culture, where we're really telling our entrepreneurs that if you want it bad enough, you're going to make a lot of sacrifices, and that includes sleep and health and going to the gym and spending time with your families. And that's just we're taught that that's just the way it has to be if you want to make it. And I don't believe in that at all. As someone who's lived it,
Right.
and I now preach to my entrepreneurs that they need to first make sure there's some non-negotiables, sleep being the main one that entrepreneurs
Right.
tend to not adhere to, right? So you want to make sure you're sleeping. You want to make sure you're taking time to go to the gym. You want to make sure that you're taking downtime to meditate, to spend time with your family, and those types of things. And then people look at you crazy a lot of times and wonder, well, how in the world am I going to get all of this done? But if you, as an entrepreneur, and this is me as an investor looking at you, if you're telling me that you can't convince anyone else to take on part of this load, then how great is your idea anyway?
Yeah, that's a great
Right?
point. Yeah, that's really good.
Hey, we want to thank you first of all so much for coming on the podcast and then doing this video. So we also want people to know how to get kind of in the queue,
Connection with
whatever we
ATO
should say with
Ventures,
ATO
yeah.
Ventures. So share with our viewers how to do that.
So the best way, it's going to sound crazy to some people, but the best way to connect with me is to follow along on Instagram at hopp.vc. So Hopp is spelled
HOPP.
HOPP, right? So just like
Okay.
jump, only with two P's. So hopp.vc, VC for venture capital. And I really do my best to reply to stories where I'm tagged or comments that people make. And that's a good way to interact and start building a relationship, even though it's virtual. Start building a relationship because, as we talked about in the
Right.
podcast, we won't ever really fund someone that we don't know. And so
Right.
building a relationship before you need the funding, not just with me, but any venture capitalist, makes sense. And then the other thing is just submitting your startup on the website, which is atoventures.com.
Right. That's great.
Hey, I encourage you, go back and listen to the entire podcast. It was fun. It was fascinating. Learn about Jennifer's criminal background in not eighth grade, 8 years old.
8 years old, and I started.
Not every VC comes through that upbringing, that background, but it really helps you really analyze business well. Hey, until next week, have a great week. Stay safe. And remember, to become a shark in the business world, we all start out as shrimp.